He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
The first thing you see when you descend the ramp into Kelly Tarlton's aquarium is a replica of the hut of the polar explorer Robert Falcon Scott, down to the very last detail. From there you pass through an icy enclosure, a replica of the Antarctic full of penguins. You wander past the tidal pools full of crabs, starfish and eels. They do sleepovers in this room for school trips. And then finally, you get to the thing that really makes Kelly Tarlton's famous. The tunnels that put you under the sea. You get whisked along on a motorised travelator, watching fish and sharks and stingrays cruise through the water above you through thick, curved sheets of acrylic plastic. It's the closest thing you can do to scuba diving without getting your hair wet. And that's intentional. The guy who built this famous aquarium in Auckland had a lifelong love of scuba diving. And he wanted to recreate that experience for people who weren't willing or able to strap an air tank to their back and a weight belt around their waist. He wanted to bring his love of the underwater world to the masses. His name, as you've probably already guessed, was Kelly Tarlton. When he built this aquarium in 1984, Kelly Tarlton put everything on the line. He had taken out multiple loans, sold the family home. He was gambling everything. Kelly Tarlton and his crew had done the numbers and reckoned that they'd need 100,000 people to come through the doors before Christmas of that year to break even. No one was sure if this could happen. This entire venture was riding on a gut feeling that this was an attraction people would want to see. Kelly Tarlton Underwater World opened on January 26th, 1985, and just 7 weeks later, 6 months ahead of schedule, Kelly Tarlton personally shook the hand of that 100,000th visitor. Kelly went home to bed that night, knowing his future was secure. He could buy a new home for his family. He'd have enough money to support them. He could look forward to his next big adventure. But Kelly Tarlton never woke up. He died in his sleep, aged 47, leaving behind his wife Rosemary and his 2 daughters, Nicole and Fiona. He also left behind an unfinished adventure, a lost treasure at the bottom of the ocean. But more on that in a moment. Kelly's influence went far beyond what he could have imagined. His design for those underwater tunnels was revolutionary and has gone on to be replicated in over 70 countries across the globe. When you think about the millions of people who've been inspired by the beauty of the underwater world while travelling through those tunnels, it's hard to shake the idea that Kelly made more of a contribution to the cause of marine ecology than any other New Zealander. While pretty much everyone today knows about Kelly Tarlton's underwater world, far fewer people know the story of the man who built it. And believe me, it's an absolutely crazy story. Kelly was a pioneer in the early days of scuba diving and underwater photography. He was a passionate advocate of marine conservation, an adventurer who pushed the limits. But maybe, most of all, Kelly Tarlton was a treasure hunter.
Hello everyone, this is Kelly Tarlton speaking. I'm going to show you a 5-minute slide program. Please come reasonably close to the screen to ensure a good view.
He said, they're asking me if you're the divers from New Zealand and maybe I could introduce them to you and shake their hand, because he said we're never going to see them again, because he said every diver's died on the Lutine. So we went there knowing that the record of being a diver on the Lutine wasn't great.
Suddenly, Wade found a small pile of coins in a patch of sand. We were onto the treasure.
The under four, they're all naked around on board. They don't wear anything. Except when they're diving, they put the diving gear on, or they put a pair of short, a t-shirt on, so the tank don't rub into their skin.
When that first bag of coins was poured out on the deck of the salvage boat, everyone went wild with excitement. Back below, we scooped up handsful and shoveled them into sacks.
Yeah, half the ship was always under the sand. But, you know, we've now got 3 or 4 metres of this black, evil sludge. Over thousands of bloody kilometres. It's the whole Bay of Plenty.
Counting our $12,000 haul, we headed home. Up there lies a further 1.5 tons of silver coins. One day soon we'll have another try.
That's an example to people. If you really want to do something, you think there's something you should do or whatever, stick at it. And there you are, it comes to fruition, doesn't it?
I'm Hamish Williams, and this is Kelly Tarlton's Final Treasure Hunt. Kelly Tarlton's obsession with all things underwater started pretty young.
Dad built us a swimming pool to teach us to swim, except there was one snag. He wanted us to dive in at the end and breaststroke or overarm to the other end. Fine with me. Kelly, no way. He would dive in, swim all the way under the water. This is a little child, what, 7, 8? All the way to the other end. And Dad was so frustrated with him that he wouldn't swim properly.
This is Althea. She's Kelly's big sister.
I'm Althea Elsie Pocock, nee Tarlton. Kelly was my young brother, 4 years younger than me. He was the most delightful little boy, oh my gosh. And of course we grew up at Te Koupuru, which is just south of Dargaville on the Northern Wairoa River, which leads into the Kaipara Harbour.
So looking back, it seems obvious to Althea that her little brother was destined to make a career underneath the waves.
You know, when we look back and think, well, he always loved being under the water. So he was a little tadpole, really.
But actually, Kelly's first big obsession wasn't diving. It was climbing. That kicked off after the family moved from Dargaville down to Christchurch when Kelly was a teenager.
He thought he'd join the Canterbury Mountaineering Club, and he had a couple of near scrapes in the mountains during that time.
These near scrapes Althea's talking about included getting stuck on Mount Cook and surviving overnight in a makeshift snow cave. Pretty full-on experience for a teenager.
And I think was thinking, oh, I don't know about this. But then he saw Jacques Cousteau, the diver's film called Silent World.
This is a motion picture studio 165 feet under the sea. These divers, wearing the compressed air aqualung, are true spacemen, swimming free as fish.
And he was so wrapped in it, of course, that he thought, oh, blow the mountains, and he joined the Canterbury Underwater Club here and made lifelong friends.
Now, one of those friends was a guy called Keith Gordon. He lives in Auckland these days and he's president of the Underwater Heritage Group. It's an organisation dedicated to finding, studying and preserving shipwrecks. I've been to many of their homes and essentially they all look like pirate lairs. The walls are covered in maps and old photos of men in old-fashioned scuba gear, some of it cobbled together by hand. The lounges are dominated by cabinets filled with gold and brass curiosities. The glass-topped coffee tables are like picture frames for displays of gold and jewels on green and red velvet. In the backyard, there's usually half a dozen portholes and corroded nautical instruments hanging from the fence, maybe a rust-covered anchor planted in the lawn. And one time, I was greeted by a wife decked out in 18th century necklaces, bangles and rings, all dredged up from the bottom of the ocean.
Okay, Keith Raymond Gordon, and originally from South Island, anyhow, yeah.
Whereabouts? It's a big island.
Well, yeah, with Kelly and them was Christchurch.
Keith first met Kelly in the Canterbury Underwater Club.
We started off mainly spearfishing, a lot of us. Things like aqualungs and that type of equipment was pretty rare and expensive, and so we made a lot of our own equipment.
One of Keith's mates was an aircraft engineer, and he'd borrow bits and pieces of scrap, put them together with old World War II blueprints for how to make underwater breathing apparatus.
We'd use fire bottles, CO2 fire bottles for air and that, and experimented with it.
Building breathing equipment that you're reliant on to plunge to the depths of the ocean sounds pretty risky to me. But for these guys, it was just a means to an end.
Yeah, with Kelly, he joined the Canterbury Underwater Club, where we were actually on a trip across to the west coast. Kelly was on the trip with us, and he had just acquired a New Zealand-made aqualung. It was quite an envy to us that here's this fellow with a proper aqualung, not like what we had, bits and pieces made up.
And he wasn't very experienced either at that point.
No, in fact, that was his first diving he was doing.
Kelly at this point was the definition of all the gear and no idea. But what he lacked in experience, Kelly made up for in enthusiasm and sometimes in raw physical ability.
Like, for instance, we went to up in Marlborough. We'd go out diving, spearfishing and that. And on that trip, Kelly decided he'd try and set a New Zealand depth record, which we really didn't have one then. So Kelly, we dived down a rope. We had there was scallop shells tied to it with depths. And he came back up held it up, one that he went to 80 feet, so that was declared a record.
While Canterbury was a great place to start, Kelly and his mates quickly got sick of diving in water where you could barely see your hand in front of your face.
We used to get fed up with the dirty water around Canterbury, around Banks Peninsula, low visibility and that. So anyway, Kelly got a posting to Whangarei. So he goes up there and, of course, tells everybody how great this is.
Kelly successfully transferred his job as a technician at the Postal Service to Whangarei in the beautiful waters of winterless Northland. His dive hours, despite already being pretty high, were about to increase thanks to an unlikely working partnership.
William Hall Palmer, yeah. I'm the third generation watchmaker, lived in Whangarei at that stage, and the post office backed onto our jeweller shop in Whangarei, and I got to know that there was a diver there. Contacted him and said, "Oh, hey, listen, I'm mad keen on getting out tonight sometimes." That was the start of it, so we got to know. Then he moved into an apartment in Whangarei, which became a bolt hole for a lot of divers.
Bill Palmer was, and still is, the go-to guy for jewels, gold, anything that might be considered treasure. But Bill was about to play a pivotal role in helping Kelly find perhaps one of the greatest treasures in his life, Rosemary.
Well, physically, he was an attractive man in that, he was only about 5'11". He wasn't tall. He was, he had a personality. When I look at people, I sort of look at their eyes and their features, their body language, and I just thought he had a wonderful, he was at peace with himself, he was happy.
Confident.
Very confident, and he was a mad dancer. He was very uninhibited. And he would, I expect I saw him as sort of a leader, because how some people come in a room and the room lights up. That was Kelly, yeah. And he had some wonderful friends, Bill Palmer being one of them.
And this is the point where Bill Palmer, watchmaker, becomes Bill Palmer, matchmaker.
I went to a coffee bar and with my girlfriend for coffee. I was about 18, just turned 18, something. And Kelly came in and he clapped eyes on me. And it took him about 3 weeks to arrange for my friend Bill to organise a meeting just by accident for Kelly to meet me. And I don't know, we just started going out together. And I looked at him and I thought, I might spend the rest of my life with you. And I was all about 18. But you know how you meet someone and you know you're going to be friends forever? Yeah, I had that content feeling with him. So it was meant to be.
Kelly and Rosemary started going out, and no surprises, Kelly took her diving to a special spot he knew, the Poor Knights Islands.
When we weren't diving, we were caving. And we,
Had you done diving before you met Kelly?
I was only a social diver. I wasn't a heavy diver.
So he was like, come do this diving thing, let me show you Poor Knight.
No, he went diving and I sat on the boat and watched. He courted me.
Right.
Yeah, as a romantic, and he courted me. Yeah.
These days, the Poor Knights Islands are internationally famous as a destination for divers. In the summer, the island swarms with snorkelers and divers on commercial tourist boats. Back in the 60s, nobody but Bill, Kelly and eventually Rosemary really knew about it. They quickly discovered the dramatic submarine canyons, enormous sea caves and warm clear water made it paradise for wildlife. Bill and Kelly managed to land a job cataloguing that wildlife for scientists down in Wellington.
I've found 12 or 13 different specimens out there, new to New Zealand, and luckily I've had 3 of them named after me, which is really quite nice. So
that's quite something, you know. Yeah. Not all of us get species named after us.
No, it's rather quite nice. Yeah.
And you had to go through the documentation of this too, which you guys did you do that as a team, or was Kelly sort of in charge of that because he was the photographer?
Documenting them? No, yeah. The sea urchin was done by Dr. Alan Baker at Te Papa Museum. I sent him a photograph and he said, could you send us send us one down to have a look at? So I went out there and took a big plastic rubbish bin out there with it and brought one up I had a steel hook, pulled it up, put it in the bucket, and it sort of filled the bottom of the bucket, filled it up with salt water, wrapped it up in plastic bags and sent it down to him in Wellington. It leaked on the plane, which they weren't happy about. Salt water on an aircraft is not good. Anyway, it was alive when it got there, and he then rang me back and said, it's a species of diadema I've never seen before. I'm going to name it after you. So he did, yeah.
Bill and Kelly's groundbreaking work at the Poor Knights ended up with it becoming an ecological reserve, and Jacques Cousteau listed it as one of his favourite dive spots. The guys were living a diver's dream, and most importantly, developing their diving skills to extraordinary levels. The work came to an end, and this would be a cool enough legacy to leave, but actually, Kelly was just getting going. He started coming up with new ideas to bring the underwater experience to life above the waterline. Was that always your memory of him, that he was an ideas guy that could put it into action?
He did. And we had a thing called Aquarama in Whangarei, where it was a boat show. They decided that we've got to do something to get people more interested in coming along to Aquarama.
Kelly had the idea to make diving a spectator event, and so with Bill's help, they converted an old petrol tank into a watertight chamber for a diver to stand in.
Sealed it and put plastic window on it, and Muggins was the one that had to come up with setting an underwater record.
The record that they set out to break was for length of time underwater. Except they sort of bent the rules a bit, having it in this tank. With the window to see the diver attempting the record, there was also all the practical things that could be witnessed.
So So people would come along and look at you in there, and they'd feed me by putting bananas down inside it, and then if I wanted to have a pee, they'd cover that up there, and I had a plastic bag I had to pee in. Yeah.
Bill set a time of 10.5 hours while the public looked on. All the while, the guys were making it as entertaining as possible for the masses.
They'd give me a newspaper, and if I opened the newspaper really carefully, I could read it. You know, if you went like that, it would rip. So you could read books, read comics and things like that. They had those immersion heaters hanging in there, dangerous, to warm the water up, because I had a wetsuit on. And it got to the stage where the guys had gone to sleep and I was overcooked and I had to get out. So that's why I got out.
Despite all these side missions, the truth is that from almost the very beginning, this group of diving fanatics' real passion was shipwrecks. Which leads us to the treasure hunt part of this all. In my experience, you don't tend to find great stories, they find you. And the story I'm about to tell you just happened to find me on the back of a boat. 10 years ago, for a very modest amount of money, I managed to purchase a 1976 Herreshoff-designed yacht, otherwise known as an H-28. She's named Bacharach. Anyone from the sailing world knows that they're considered highly reliable vessels, albeit very slow. Their nickname is the floating footpath, as the top speed is round about the same pace of a brisk walk at 6 knots. Once you have a boat, the next thing you need is a crew. And amongst many of my friends, there's always been one regular who consistently showed up and was keen to help. Her name is Fiona Tarlton. I first met Fiona about 15 years ago at a party, and pretty much since then, we've been friends.
I remember the first time that we did that trip, and your mum Rosemary came down with a big bouquet of flowers.
Oh yes.
And I didn't know why. And I thought to myself, oh no, Rosemary thinks that, you know, she's completely misjudged this boat and thinks that it's like some giant palatial, you know, super yacht, and probably imagines these are going to be put in the, put in the dining quarters or something. And then, of course, I said to her, I was like, oh, wow, thanks. And she said, no, sorry, they're not for you. And I was even more confused because I was like, why is she turning up with these flowers? But so why did your mum bring the flowers down that day?
So the thought was that as we went past the poor nights off Tutakaka region, which was at night time actually, I think I gave everybody a flower or something, and we all put them in the water, and I said a prayer to Kelly, and just had a quiet moment thinking of Dad as we cruised past. So.
It's interesting because I never really talked much to you about your dad, and I guess that's for the reason I was sort of didn't really want to talk about it unless you did.
Well, yeah, as Kelly's daughter, and I've got a sister, Nicole, Dad was a treasure hunter, which is a bit different from other people's dads that I knew.
But that night, after we'd dropped those flowers in the ocean off the poor nights, Fiona started telling me about her dad. And in particular, she told me about his final treasure hunt, the one he never had a chance to finish. And this wasn't a hunt for gold or jewels. It was the hunt for what might be New Zealand's oldest European artefact.
De Surville's anchor from 1769. So this French explorer was here in New Zealand, at the same time as Captain Cook, which most Kiwis don't even realise.
That night, as we sat beside the tiller, Fiona told me how De Surville, unlike Captain Cook, didn't come to New Zealand by choice. He was on a voyage to South America, but with his crew dropping dead one by one from scurvy, he was forced to land at Doubtless Bay in the far north, just south of the Karikari Peninsula. In the final days of 1769, a huge storm brewed up. De Surville's ship, the St Jean Baptiste, began to drag on its anchors. The wind and waves drove it closer and closer to the rocks. He was forced to slash the anchor lines and sail into the storm. The 3 anchors were lost, abandoned at the bottom of the ocean for more than 200 years.
Dad was really interested in those anchors, and another diver had been looking for about 20 years or so. Like, other divers are very interested in finding these historical anchors because, of course, they're the earliest authenticated European artefacts in New Zealand.
By this point, the mid-1970s, Kelly Tarlton was by far the most experienced, successful treasure hunter in the country. So he turned his considerable expertise to the task of finding these anchors. And he realised that in the last few decades of searching, everyone had been looking in the wrong place.
Kelly realised that no one else had taken account of the Earth's magnetic fluctuation over time.
In the last 200 years, the magnetic pole had drifted, so what had been magnetic north in De Surville's day was now several degrees off.
And so when all these other divers have been looking, in the last 20 years or so for 2 big anchors near this big rock, Kelly thought, hold on here, it's not those big rocks, it's probably this big rock.
Kelly grabbed his boat, linked up with a friend, John Pettigrew, and went out to test his theory.
I went up to Doubtless Bay, and Dad was dragged behind on weighted ropes about 10 metres off the ocean floor. After 12 minutes of being in the water dragged along, he came up and he had located the first anchor.
Kelly was beaten to the second anchor by a local diver, Mike Beardsley. And Kelly actually went out to congratulate Mike at the historic find. After extensive preparation, the anchors were put on display. Mike Beardsley's anchor went to Kaitaia Museum, while Kelly Tarlton's went to Te Papa National Museum in Wellington. It hangs over the museum foyer to this day. If you glance up and to the left as you walk through the doors, you'll see it looming over you. 4.5 metres of blackened, corroded iron. It's one of the 3 oldest European artefacts ever found in New Zealand. A physical reminder of one of the earliest encounters between European and Māori. An encounter which ended in disaster for both peoples. But there was still a third anchor at the bottom of the ocean, and Kelly was determined to recover it.
In 1982, he finally had a chance to go and search for this third anchor. He had so many other projects always going on, so then we went up to Doubtless Bay. He managed to locate the third historical De Surville anchor. And
Did he pull it up?
He didn't pull it up.
Lifting a 1.5 tonne anchor from the bottom of the ocean is no easy feat, and this one was more challenging than the other that had come before. The third De Surville anchor was more than 40 metres beneath the surface, with one fluke jammed into the reef. Kelly took photographs of the anchor. He noted the location carefully and determined to return and recover it as soon as he'd finished his latest scheme, a new aquarium he planned to build in Auckland, the one with those revolutionary transparent tunnels. But then, tragically, Kelly Tarlton died. His final treasure hunt was left incomplete. And here's the weird thing. In the 40 years since he passed, the anchor seems to have vanished.
Kelly always wrote down, and kept scrapbooks and you name it, but Mum and I have searched and searched the office and the attic and just looking for the information on that 1982 located anchor by Kelly of De Surville, and we cannot find the longitude and latitude, any notes. So all we really have is newspaper accounts, a little bit of typing by Dad, but just talks about, in 1982, located to Serval's third anchor. And the real detailed notes, we don't know where they are, and it's been driving us a bit crazy trying to find them.
And it's not as though no one's been looking. Over the past few decades, multiple divers, including old friends of Kelly like Keith Gordon, have gone searching for the anchor, but nobody can find it.
It would be so special to be able to locate, Dad's anchor, especially after 40 years of Dad passing away. So many people who worked with Dad on various projects, his dive team, staff at the Shipwreck Museum and the staff who built the aquarium, and even today's staff of Sea Life Kelly Tarltons. It just would be very special to be able to locate Kelly's final treasure.
When Fiona told me the story of Kelly Tarlton's final treasure, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It stuck in my mind all summer long. I read all the books and old newspaper clippings about Kelly and his adventures beneath the sea. I tracked down his old friends and collaborators, bombarding them with questions. I pored over de Serval's logs and charts, just like Kelly had all those years ago. And then, I went on an adventure. An adventure I want to share with all of you here listening. Kelly Tarlton's final treasure hunt.
Well, that's all. Thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed this program.
Coming up next time on Kelly Tarlton's final treasure hunt.
Kelly was the master blaster and I was his right-hand man.
And I had the detonators in my pocket and I had the jelly in my suitcase out the back and I was on a small seaplane and I could have shot him.
He said the difference between me scuba diving and you being in there in your helmet, he said, is that you won't have to listen to me screaming for the last 30 seconds. So we kind of left it at that.
Thanks for listening to Kelly Tarlton's final treasure hunt. If you like the show, be sure to follow us on your favourite podcasting app. And if you want to help more people find the show, please leave us a review. Kelly Tarlton's final treasure hunt is written and presented by me, Hamish Williams. Our producers are Ali Callahan, William Ray, Phil Vine and Justin Gregory. Our sound engineers are William Saunders, Phil Benge and Mark Chesterman. Our production coordinator is Brianna Juritich and the executive producer is Tim Watkin. Special thanks to the Tarlton family for their support and trust in making this podcast. There is so much more to the life of Kelly Tarlton. There are some great books on his life available. We've made some recommendations on the show's webpage. You can find that at rnz.co.nz/podcasts.